That's an interesting time of the year. We look at numbers on YouTube, on the website, and I've been watching those numbers for a decade and writing articles for a long time and watching the traffic when people are actually out here. And I try to match what you guys want in the videos with what is going on at the current time. And it's interesting because the numbers really tank in the hunting industry wide through, for the most part, through March, April, right around there, and into May, and then they start going up gradually, and then it's exponential growth into August, September, October, November, and then sometime late November, December, they start to go down again. And what's interesting, right now we're in that little bit of a lull time, just about in that uptick. People have made it through their winter activities, they're into the spring, and they start thinking outdoors, and we've had a cold spring, so it's pushed back a lot of thoughts even, let's do this now, even habitat work. But one of the things you still have a lot of time for and is so valuable is your post-winter scouting, your spring scouting, whatever you want to call. And I think if you know how to interpret the sign correctly and you're excited about deer hunting right now because it's not that far away from the season, it really isn't. So we're in that halfway period where we're almost back to our deer season. We're working towards that. And I want to give you some tips going out into the woods right now as the weather's starting to break. Hopefully we're starting to see a little bit of spring green up. It's such an advantage before spring green up, before leaf out, before bugs, ticks, everything. And I know there's ticks out there right now, but boy, there's not very many mosquitoes in most locations, so that's a good thing. And the black flies haven't started yet either. So what you do look for when you're heading out to the woods right now during the springtime and after the winter? Well, I can tell you, number one, sheds and deer sign right now really lie. And so you really have to learn some of these subsequent tips and understand what you're actually seeing in the woods. If you're seeing high pellet counts in concentrated areas within conifer, thermal protection, deep draws in hill country, where deer are blowing off the ridges during the wintertime seeking shelter and thermal protection, then they're probably not relating to where you should hunt in the fall. Typically, not always, but probably a vast majority of the time, 80-90% of the time, where you find sheds in the wintertime is not where those deer are going to be in the fall, at least not where they're spending the most appreciable amount of their time. Typically where deer sheds, where he's at during the summertime, he's forecasting, you know what, guys, I'll be back in July, where I was at in July, I'll be back in November, I'll be back in October, but just for a little visit here and there, so maybe sometimes even in the middle of the night, maybe only during the rut. But I want you to look at sign and understand, well, this is what I'm going to see during the fall, and this is reflective of that. So be very wary of where you find sheds. Be very wary of where you find concentrated pellets. Lots of trails and sign right now that looks very pleasing, because it might not only not help you unravel the secrets of a mature buck that you're after, but it actually can be very misleading and be detrimental to your future success. That's why I like looking for number 2, complementary rut sign. What do I mean by that? And we'll skip down to a Dylanism. We're pointing out this will be part of this information right here, but complementary rut sign means if you're seeing heavy sign and it's accompanied by lots of rubs, lots of scrapes, then you can look at it and say, okay, this is a good sign. And because there's rut sign taking place, it means it's taking place in your area, typically the end of October, November, early December. That's when the majority of rut sign is being actually carried out in the woods by bucks, by mature bucks. And so when you match those two together, that can be a good indication that you're on the right path towards unraveling a buck's secret hideout, or even deer in general, where they're moving during the fall. Number 3, something I referred to as a long time, is historical sign. What I mean by that is you're finding that historical rub sign. You're finding historical scrapes, oaks on the edge of a field that are broken over. You're finding licking branches. And a lot of this applies to private land or public land. I'm not really sure that we're being very specific on either with this video. And what I find is deer. Whitetail concepts are whitetail concepts. Yes, you advance into deer habitat, food plots on private land, but it's all the same. Deer relate to each other. They relate to hunters the same. Bucks relate to does, young bucks, old bucks. They all relate to each other the same, whether they're on private or public land. A lot of times on public land, the woods are bigger. The distance between roads are bigger. Deer will have bigger areas that they cover. lower quality food sources dictate that, lower quality cover areas. But bottom line is, what doesn't matter if I'm private or public land, when I go into an area, I expect to find deer movement. I expect fall movement, and I see that complementary historical sign, meaning rubs that have been there for several years, many years, not just the rubs of last year, but you're looking into the area and saying, wow, there are a lot of rubs here and they've been taking place for years, and that's a great indicator that you should hang your stand and a potential spot for a fall great hunt not too far away. Hey, you guys, we'll get back to the video really quick, but we are having our Camp Kicking Bear June 11th charity event again this year. It's $300 times 50 people for the habitat portion. We're gonna have a $100 hunt giveaway. Bottom line is, here are the details right here. Again, June 11th, mark it on your calendar. You can pre-register by emailing the site. We'll have more details to follow, but I can't wait to meet you if you come to the event. Every dime we raise goes to Camp Kicking Bear. It's a great cause. Now back to today's video. Number 4, it's springtime. It's late winter, but think fall. Think if I'm looking at this sign and I'm trying to unravel it and make sense of it, does it make sense that this sign was actually delivered and dropped and displayed during the fall? Or is this from summer sign? Summer sign, a lot of times when bucks are just shedding their velvet, they're hitting a lot of whips and small trees that they just break over. I'll give you examples, small early successional growth willows. Bucks will get in there, they break them over. Sumac on the edges of woods, on the edges of fields. Lots of early rub sign that isn't indicative of where deer are at in the fall. So looking at this and just saying, yeah, it's springtime, but where would I be traveling if I was a buck through this area during the fall? He's going to travel on the edge of a habitat change. He's going to travel on benches and in hill country. He's going to travel between connections of woods, especially in thick areas where he can move easily throughout without getting hung up, not too thick. And it can be too thick. I've seen many clear cuts in many locations on lots of different states where we can't walk through without crawling and diving and climbing. And a big buck's not going to be able to go through there either. There's areas where does and fawns readily visit, but a big mature buck won't go through. So he's going to travel the edge of those thick areas. He's going to travel through security areas, areas where you can imagine him sneaking through. But really, you have to imagine that it'll be there in the fall. Imagine where he's going to be with no leaves on the trees. Is there still going to be cover? Because then you're looking at his true November paradise, and if you unravel that, then you're again in the right direction with your scouting efforts, especially when you're ignoring all that winter clutter and winter sign. Number 5, scout people. What I mean by that, if I'm on a public land, I want to find where people are currently at. It's public land. The hunting manual in all states, share public land, kumbaya. It's a big happy place. But when I went out on public land, and you have a legal right to hunt right next to somebody, that doesn't mean it's ethical. There's a difference. Legal and ethical aren't always the same. You need to understand that, and that should be taught in hunting manuals, state hunting guidelines, but typically it is not. And what I mean by that, when I go out on public land, if I find that someone is hunting in this location, I don't want to come back. For one, they already found it, kind of takes the game away from it. I want to discover things on my own, even though we're never really discovering something for the first time on public land, or very rarely. But I don't want to be bothered when I hunt next fall. So I want to find an area that's away from people. So I'm scouting people because I don't want to run into them in the fall. I want to be able to enjoy my hunt and find a little slice of heaven. And yes, there's a lot of that on public land, way more than most people realize. Most public land is not overrun by hunters. Dylan's talking about right now, he can't wait to go to a public land chunk around just in a secret location.
Not saying a word.
Within 10 hours of here. And he can't wait to go just cruise around with a turkey tag and enjoy the hunt, just exploring on some public land. And I bet, Dylan, you're not going to run into a dozen people out there unless they're all parking in the same spot you are. Yeah. It wouldn't be a good spot then. You probably wouldn't leave the truck. But the bottom line, there's a lot of great places to hunt. So when you're on a public land, try to find where people are at. For one, I think it is considerate of other people. And 2, whether you have a legal right to be there or not doesn't mean it's right. And then 2, I don't want to be bugged by people. I don't want to have my hunt ruined by someone else. That's important. And then also complementary use. What do I mean by that? If you're on private or public land, you get into an area and you're thinking, man, this looks really good. this historical sign. There's reason for deer to be here during the fall because of fall food, fall cover. And then you find that old broken tree stand right in the location that you're thinking about hunting. You find a board at the base of a tree that indicated that someone was there at some point. Maybe an old chair or something. Well, aside from picking it up and removing the trash from the woods, the real point is you thought it was a good spot. You did your homework. It was complemented by sign, but it wasn't only the sign that it was complemented. It was complemented by other hunters that obviously took the time to find the exact same spot that you found, whether it's on private or public land. And that could be a great indication when you're scouting people that you found a hot spot to hunt during the fall. We have to bring up a Dylanism here. So Dylan, when we got to the end of this, he made this point and a good catchphrase, and I think it's a good catchphrase too. Once I understood it, I can be a little dense. I can admit, Dylan, what did I do on a Zoom call today with a potential partner? And they're super nice people, and we all got a good laugh at my expense. But what
Jeff
dumb...
called me over. Jeff called me over to like join his Zoom call, and he didn't even have the video turned on. For a half hour, you were on this call.
It was not a half hour. It was only 25 minutes, folks. It was 25 minutes, I can guarantee. But
I go to introduce myself, and they're like, well, we actually can't see you guys.
that was terrible. Yeah, anyways, I guess I'm showing my age. But Dylan, your Dylanism.
Rubs don't lie.
Rubs don't lie. And I thought about that. I thought, yeah, they do, Dylan. There's been many times you stick a trail camera on a big rod, you never see a buck again. But Dylan, what do you mean by that?
They were made in the fall.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's as simple as that.
And that kind of goes back to complementary sign, rut sign with the sign you're seeing. Rubs are such an indication that deer are there. Now, I've seen some January rubs and February rubs where there's shavings on top of the snow in a third rut, fourth rut, but that's not common in most areas. And like Dylan said, rubs don't lie. And you can even say big rubs don't lie. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like giant antlers. They don't necessarily mean that it's an older buck. Well, 99.99% of the time, they do. There are always that exception. But when it comes to big rubs, when you see big scarring on the face of a tree, a decent sized tree, we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 inches in diameter, and then you look on the back and you can see where that beam is scarring up the back of the tree. You can see deep grooves where there's stickers and kickers. I can guarantee you go up into the UP of Michigan, a lot of wilderness areas where bucks don't grow their antlers very fast. When you have stickers and kickers, it's usually a 5-year-old buck plus. That buck has already established his age or his size, his skeletal size by the age of 4. It takes that long for them to do so, where a doe is more like 2.5. So it gets that skeletal size, and then it can start putting energy into its antler growth, and that's where it starts to display those genetic traits that would produce non-typical characteristics like stickers, forks, splits, drop tines, whatever it might be. And those will really scar up a tree and really dig into a tree. So deep gouges on the back side of a tree, you can see the whip. And so with bigger antlers that took to make those bigger rubs, by signs of width of rack and deep grooves and scarring and aggressiveness, often comes age. You can't always say that, just like big antlers, but it sure is a great indication of when you're scouting, when you find those big rubs, that you're onto an older buck, especially when you start to unravel that this travel corridor leads to that bedding area, that food source. Here's rubs in between on a pinch point. You have a historical sign to go to it, and maybe an old tree stand hanging nearby that was used 2 decades ago. Just found a hot spot. Pretty cool find. Also, what I do notice where rubs do lie a little bit, not to the time of year, but if you've ever scouted areas that allow public land bait piles, it is incredible how you're just walking through the woods on the way to somewhere where you want to hunt, and then you think, oh my gosh, where did all these rubs come from? Why are they here? And then all of a sudden you find signs of a bait pile and a blind on public land. And so at that point, those rubs can be very misleading. When you find those clusters of rubs on public land, I'm talking UP of Michigan where I used to hunt, northern Michigan, and you look at those areas and think, wow, this just doesn't make sense. Start looking for a blind or stand location nearby, and a high percentage of the time you'll find that. So, great time to scout, but you really have to ignore the clutter of winter sign, be fall focused, look for historical sign, patterns of people, and you can be on a great path to a great hunt this fall. And always remember that Dylanism of rubs don't lie. Hey guys, thanks a lot for watching all the way to the end of the video. And I wanted to make sure that you guys knew about the first Lite sale that's taking place right now. It's 10 to 20% off site-wide, including some of my favorite hunting clothes, the Solitude, Sanctuary, bibs, and jacket. Check it out. Link is in the description, and I hope you can take advantage of that right now.